Well, good morning, church. Hope you are well. Everyone doing all right? Yes, indeed. Well, good. Hey, I just want to say, as I kick off, as we were singing that song, I just want to say how grateful I am for this church. When we were singing that song, even when I don't see it, you're working. This has been a tough season. We don't need to rehash that, but I have just been inspired and grateful by all of your faithfulness. And there's something just so beautiful. You know, the picture where Moses is holding out his hands and then he starts to get weak and the church comes alongside and lifts the other person's hand up in that moment. I feel like that's been our church in many ways. And as you have been faithfully following God, I know you're lifting up other people in the community, but I just want to say as well, even as I was singing that song, I just felt a gratitude for our church. I felt a faithfulness that has inspired me in this season. And so I don't always just say thank you. But I do want to say thank you for being an amazing church that inspires my faith, and I know our staff could say the same in this season. We're just really grateful for you. Fair enough? All right. Second thing, I do need to do this. I do have to say as well, so sorry. I have to say happy birthday to my dad. He turned 70 today, and he is watching online. And so because I might have forgotten to give him a card, I'm saying thank you and happy birthday right now. So Pops, I love you. Thank you for keeping me on the insurance after all those wrecks. I will repay you one day in heaven. So sorry I had to do that, but hey, I want to dive in today to this series that we're continuing and called Breaking Culture. If you haven't been with us, we've been speaking about ways in which we can be countercultural, live out a faith like Jesus had. Today's subject we're actually speaking on is being content in a culture of envy. Being content in a culture of envy. If I could define contentment versus envy this way, I would say contentment is being thankful for, envy is I want more. So in essence, you could say, how do we be thankful for in a culture that says, I want more? And let me just say this right off the bat, because I know that a lot of us, when I say certain phrases, you're going to kind of go along with it, but it's got to really penetrate your heart. So for instance, if I went around and I said, hey, what is the greatest problem that you are facing right now? If I just walked around and said, hey, just tell me what it is that you're navigating, and I'll fix that one thing. And let's just say somehow I could become like a spiritual Oprah, right? And I could go, you get this, I'll fix this, I'll give you this, you get this. I want to suggest that the thing that deep down that you and I tend to think will satisfy us, the thing that will make us content, in reality, I don't think it really will. It simply won't satisfy. The things that we think will make us content, at peace, at rest, really at the core of their being won't. In fact, there's a quote by a man named Martin Lloyd-Jones who says this phrase in here, this idea that has been rich and yet haunting to me at the same time. It's not on the screens, but I just wanted to share this morning to frame this up. This is what he says. The terrible, tragic fallacy of the last 100 years has been to think that all of man's troubles are due to his environment, and that to change the man, you have nothing to do but change his environment. This is a tragic fallacy. Listen to this phrase. It overlooks the fact that it was in paradise that man fell. So you think about this, most of us would just say, hey, if you could change this circumstance, this problem, or you could fix this issue in your life, then you'd be happy. What he's saying is you can change the circumstances, but that doesn't mean it's going to make you happy. In fact, we forget that Adam and Eve were in a paradise. They were in the presence of God, and yet they were still discontent. They still had this feeling that something wasn't right. They were missing out on something. And let me just say this. A lot of people think that when you give your life to Jesus, you find joy. That's not always true. In fact, many of you know Christians who are quote unquote miserable. Christians who probably struggle sometimes with insecurity, feel this discontentment, this feeling like they don't quite measure up, maybe even more than people who wouldn't even call themselves Christians. So this subject of being discontent, being miserable, not being at peace is an important subject. In fact, I remember the first time as a kid that this feeling, this foreign substance of discontentment, this feeling that I didn't quite measure up actually entered my body. I remember I was in elementary school, I was playing basketball on the Grassland Gators. And there was a guy that we played with on our team named Miller. I wanted to be like Miller because I was not very good at basketball. And I remember we had this one game, it was like the playoff game. And I only got into the very end because you were required to get certain amount of playing time. And so it was like the fourth quarter, whatever it was, and I was in the game, and they passed me the ball. There's 30 seconds left. I mean, it's almost like a storybook kind of, moment in a game that you would think of. They passed the ball, 30 seconds left. We're down by 2. I'm wide open. No one's even guarding me. And half my team's like, pass the ball to Miller. He's double teamed at this point, all right? But I think this is my moment of fame, and so I take this shot. It banks off the glass, off the backboard, and actually goes in the basket. Now, here's the deal. True confession. I was not aiming for the backboard. I was going straight for the basket. I was just that bad at basketball in that moment. But I made this thing, and everyone comes up. They start cheering. But one guy at the very end comes up, and he goes, that was awesome. But next time when the game's on the line, pass the ball to Miller. And I just remember at that point, I was like in 4th grade, just feeling insecure in who I was. It was the first time I ever felt it. Many of you know what it's like, probably different story. But you know what it's like, maybe in your job, in your family, with friends, to feel like you don't quite measure up. To wish that you were someone else or had some different skill sets, to wish that you were bigger or faster or stronger or smarter or wiser, or you name it. This substance of discontentment is killing so many people emotionally and spiritually. This subject of comparing ourselves to other people. Yet the Apostle Paul says something. He says, I have learned the secret of being content, meaning it's countercultural. He says, I can be doing great or I can be in the valley. Doesn't matter. I can see all these people doing great things, doesn't faze me. I have learned the secret of being content, meaning it's countercultural. Not everyone finds this contentment. In fact, a lot of people will spend their lives, even as Christians, miserable, discontent, feeling like they long to be someone else or long for some other stuff that's going to fill the deepest void in their heart. And so today, I want to speak to you about this subject of being discontent. And I want to say a simple phrase to you that has profound impact. In fact, I want to frame today's talk like this. Contentment cannot be found horizontally. It can only be found vertically. Again, this is just one of the big ideas I want to say is contentment cannot be found horizontally. It can only be found vertically, meaning it cannot be found in the things of this earth. It can only be found in the presence of Jesus. And that sounds so simple, yet most of us at the core of our being, we don't live that way. And so what I want to do is just actually unpack a few things and prove this point is true, and then close with a couple application things. And to look at this point and just to prove that this statement is true, I want to look at the story of Solomon, who's like the poster boy for discontentment. Solomon really spent his life chasing after the things of this earth, and yet what you'll find in his story of Solomon is it didn't really fill him up. Now, when you read the book of Ecclesiastes, a lot of people get overwhelmed. They don't know how to quite make sense of the book of Ecclesiastes. I just want to give you 2 simple things that as I unpack this will help you really understand the context of Ecclesiastes. First, this book is written from the perspective of the skeptic, the searcher, someone who's far from God. So what we're going to find is when we read Ecclesiastes, he's actually playing the role of a skeptic. He is trying to find value apart from God. That's the thing I want you to see, is that ultimately when we look at this, Solomon is trying to find value apart from God. And so ultimately when you look at this, you're going to see his attempts to answer these questions. Now, if you have your Bibles, I'm just going to look at the first 2 chapters of Ecclesiastes. We could spend all day in here, but I just want to zoom into a couple verses and really unpack this idea of why you cannot find contentment horizontally. And I just want to look at verse 13, Ecclesiastes chapter 1, 13 through 14 to start this off. This is what Solomon says in verse 13. I applied my mind to study and to explore by the wisdom all that is done under the heavens. So let me just go right here and show you this. I applied my mind to study and explore by wisdom all that is done under the heavens. What a heavy burden. Supposed to say heavy right there, not a hay burden. That's not the Greek. What a heavy burden God has laid on mankind. I have seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Now here's what you got to understand. In Ecclesiastes chapter 1, Solomon is trying to find wisdom. In fact, in your Bibles, the heading will usually say wisdom. What he's trying to do in essence, when you look at wisdom, is he's trying to answer the exegetical questions, the big questions of life, like why am I here apart from God? Notice this phrase, under the heavens. I mentioned this before, but it's important. Go back to what I said. Solomon is playing the role of a skeptic and a searcher. He is trying to find value apart from God. In Hebrew culture, they believed in 3 types of heavens. I've shared this before. So they believed the highest heavens was the place where God was. They believed the solar system was the next heaven, and the atmosphere was the other heaven. So in essence, when he's saying under the heaven, he's just speaking about the fact of I'm trying to find purpose and meaning outside of God, outside of the presence of God. And he goes through these whole processes of trying to answer the big exegetical questions on his own, like what happens when you die? Well, if there's no God, nothing. Well, what is the purpose of my life? Well, you choose, you pick what makes you happy. Well, is there such things as right and wrong or morality? Well, it's up to you. And so how do you deal with pain? Well, if there's not a God, then there's no God who will meet you in that pain. There's no redemption that comes from this. And so when he starts to try to answer the exegetical questions, he gets so overwhelmed. Listen to verse 14. I have seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Ultimately, he cannot find a purpose for life outside of God. And Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 3 is, if Ecclesiastes 1 is his attempt to find wisdom and meaning from life, then what you find is Ecclesiastes chapter 2, he turns to other things. And so listen to what he says right after he cannot find meaning, he cannot find answers to the exegetical questions. Listen to Ecclesiastes 2:3. I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom, meaning I'm still trying to find out what the purpose of life is apart from God. I wanted to see what was good for people to do under the heavens during the few days of their lives. Friends, this is why understanding who you are in Jesus is so important, because if you cannot answer the exegetical questions in life, this is where you try to numb with pleasure. This is where you try to escape the things of this earth, because if you can't answer why God could meet you in pain or how God could use pain, what happens is people end up trying to escape. They feel like there is no God. They feel like God doesn't care. And ultimately, this is where addictions and bitterness starts to well up. And so Solomon, this skeptic, this searcher, is starting to go, you know what? I can't answer the questions of life, so I might as well just have fun. I might as well drink. I might as well party. I might as well chase after the things of this earth. And that's what he's doing these chapters, as you see. He keeps going. And let me just state an obvious here, but it's so important. Maybe the reason that some of us are miserable or just discontent is because we are trying to find contentment horizontally. We're trying to find it in the stuff of this earth instead of in the presence of Jesus. I love what C.S. Lewis says. I think this quote just speaks to exactly what we're saying. He says, "It would seem that our Lord finds our desires not too strong, but too weak. We are half-hearted creatures fooling around with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered to us. Like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by an offer of a holiday at sea. We are far too easily pleased." See, I cannot underscore this enough, but most of us are searching for meaning and contentment and happiness and joy out there. We're saying maybe consciously, but more likely subconsciously, if I can just get through this season, if I could just get more recognition, if I could just get my retirement here, if I can just work through the next 5 years, do you realize you are wishing away the most precious commodity that you've been given, time? Most of us will spend our lives wishing away the thing we can never get back, time. I just can't wait till this season because then I'm going to find happiness. How long, if you're honest, have you been saying that phrase? Because if you're anything like me, I'll go, well, in 1 week I'll be happy, or in 2 weeks when this thing's done. And ultimately what Solomon is saying is that no matter what you do, no matter what that season is, you simply put cannot find contentment horizontally. You can only find it vertically in the presence of God. And let me just say this practically, because I think this is important, because a lot of us we'd get a phrase like, oh yeah, you can only find contentment in the presence of Jesus. Part of the rub is most of us don't really know who we are in Jesus. Like we don't understand what it means to be a son or daughter of God. That's just a phrase we throw around. And this is such an important concept that we're actually going to spend an entire series in November unpacking very, very intentionally what it means to be a son or a daughter of God. But if I only had 2 minutes, I just want to show you an illustration that I think frames up why you cannot find contentment in the way of the world and why you can find it in the way of Jesus with this illustration, because it just shows about our identity. But think about it like this. When you look at the world's identity, right? Take the world's identity. You actually pick an identity that you want to be at an early age. In fact, a lot of kids, when you ask them the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? They'll rattle it off. In fact, someone sent me this of what a kid actually wrote in their kindergarten class. I think you'll see the picture right here. They were asked the question, what do you want to do in the future? And this is what they said. Get a girlfriend, kiss her, and number 3 is rule the world. Isn't that awesome? People at an early age, they know exactly what they want to be. In fact, there's a kid here who walks up to me every single week and he says, one day I'm going to take your job. I think I can preach better. And I'm like, great. But he knows what he wants to do. You talk to any of your kids and they'll rattle off, I want to be an astronaut, or I want to be a sailor, or I want to be a princess, or whatever. People know what they want to do. Now that evolves when you get older, but everyone picks an identity. And ultimately, you have maybe subconscious an identity that you have that would be successful to you. And here's the deal. If you perform, if you get that position, and if you do well enough in that thing, then ultimately you get the love of people around you. You feel like you can love yourself. And so this becomes something that drives us. People have an identity, and then they strive and they earn. I was just talking to a college kid this week who was saying, you know what, I've got to get into this great college, because if I get in this great college, I'm going to make this amount of money. And if I make this amount of money, then I'm going to meet the right person, then I'm going to be happy. Ultimately, he has chosen an identity. Looks different for every person. And then he's performing to try to get there. And if he gets there, then he feels he'll arrive, he'll be content, he'll be loved by people. But here's what's so fascinating about the world's identity versus Christian identity when you look at it. Notice that the world's identity ends with love. That what are you striving for at the end of the day? You're striving for value and love and acceptance. But what is so rich about Christian identity is this: it starts with love. You're as a Christian, you don't even start with your identity. You start with love. The verse that we say all the time in John 3, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. I love what Romans 8:38 says, for I'm convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, nothing will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus. Friends, if you know how loved you are, if you know what you have in Jesus, you don't spend your life trying to find something out there. If you knew the depths of how God felt about you, you don't spend your life trying to earn what you already have in Jesus. But most of us, we don't really believe that. It hasn't eaten away at the core. We even think in our relationship with Jesus that we got to do enough great stuff for him to really love us. And that's not the gospel. The gospel is the fullness of Jesus dwells in you, not because of what you do, but because what has been done on the cross. That's the gospel. And some of you will spend your life, and I'm saying this out of love, some of you will spend your life and you're 50 and 60 and miserable, not because you didn't accomplish your dreams, but because you don't know who you are in Jesus. The favor and the love of God is on your life. You don't need more money, more recognition, more power. You just need to know who you are. But see, here's the thing. Once you get that love, it drives your identity. So I am loved, not because I perform. I'm loved because I'm a son or daughter in Jesus Christ. And out of that love, if I really get that, then all of a sudden that drives me. That drives me to love and serve people. See the power of this? This brings contentment, friends. You don't have to do one more thing. You can find contentment right now. You could go be with Jesus right now, not accomplish one more thing. And if you're right with him and you know who you are, you would find contentment and peace would flow up and well out of you. If you don't, you will spend your life trying to perform to earn something you already have. This is why it's so important. But the other thing that I think is the reason we can't find contentment in the things of this earth is because, let's be honest, the stuff of this earth cannot really satisfy the deepest longings of your heart. You know, it's like you get the iPhone 8 and you're like, this is great for a day. And then the iPhone 10 and the iPhone 12 and the iPhone XS 12 comes out or whatever it is. And it's always just like, I gotta have this, I gotta have this. The stuff of this world just cannot satisfy the deepest longings of your heart. You know, it was my son's 6th birthday this past week. We got him all these Pokemon toys. And he started opening them, and this was just shocking to me, especially in light of this message. He started opening them. Do you know the first thing he did? Is he put his toys on the side, and he looked at the back, and what he started to look at was all the toys that he did not have. And so he's looking at me, and he's going, Dad, this one's awesome. Like, Dad, can we get this one? Dad, this would be great to complete the set. Dad, can we get this one? Dad, what if we got all of them? Dad, what about this one? Can we go next week? Can we go today? When will I get more money? And he just keeps going on and on and on. And finally I said, son, I'm not made of money and sin. We're not getting any more, right? Like, you got to be content with what you've got. And it just was a haunting picture of my son. Here he is. Instead of enjoying what he has right in front of him, this great gift, he's looking at what he does not have. Now, isn't it true that for so many of us, we've been given so many rich blessings? Like, so many blessings, and I am the worst culprit of this. But most of us, like my son, we don't sit and think about and live in the gifts we've been given. We go, God, but when am I going to get this? Or God, ultimately, this person has this. When was that going to happen? God, when are you going to bless me with that? God, when is this circumstance going to change? And instead of just counting the blessings of what we have, we are simply looking at what we do not have, and we wonder why we're miserable. Because discontentment has started to creep in. I love what Charles Spurgeon famously said. He said, you say, if I had a little more, I should be very satisfied. You make a mistake. If you are not content with what you have, you would not be satisfied if it were doubled. Because, again, contentment is I am thankful for, and envy is I want more. You will keep wanting more and more. And I think this is important just to illustrate this maybe at a deeper level. I want you to think about sort of two roads, right? Let's just say this is the horizontal road of trying to find contentment in the things of this earth, and this is the vertical road trying to find contentment in the things of Jesus. Most of us, if we're chasing after the things of this earth, if we're trying to find contentment on this path, on the earth, horizontally speaking, most of us don't think we're on the wrong road. We just don't think we've traveled far enough down the road. So most of us don't think, like, take whatever it is. For some people, it's recognition. Like, if I just had more recognition, if my spouse recognized me more, if my family recognized me more, if my boss recognized me more, then I'd be happy. Most of us just think if it's recognition is the goal, then ultimately, I just haven't got far enough down that road. Again, if it's position, well, you know what? Like, I've got a pretty good job, but if I could just get a few rungs down the career path, then I would probably be more happy. And you pick your poison, whatever it is, comfort, pleasure, a little less anxiety, whatever it is. If I can just get down here, then I would be happy. But you know what I find fascinating about the book of Ecclesiastes? Do you know the very last chapter? Solomon is towards the end of his life. Do you know who he writes Ecclesiastes to? At the very top, it says, remember your Creator in the days of your youth. Solomon is at the end of his life, and he is writing young people. Why? Because most people, if they're younger, they'll tend to think, you know what? The issue is not with the road I'm on. The issue is not with power, success. I just don't have enough of it. And you get to Solomon. He spent his entire life chasing after, playing the role of skeptic, chasing after and taking the road on this earth of comfort and pleasure further than anyone else ever could. Do you know that when I did some studies, he actually would have made annually $500 billion a year. He was considered the wisest man on earth. His buildings, his accomplishments, his accolades rivaled no one. I mean, everyone knew who this guy Solomon was. The most beautiful women were surrounded by him. I mean, everything this culture would say would make you happy. He had taken the road as far as it could possibly go, trying to find contentment in the things of this earth. And listen to what he says in Ecclesiastes chapter 2:11, after he lists off all of his accomplishments and accolades. Yet when I had surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had told to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. So he writes young people, and he ultimately says, here's the deal. You've got to make sure that you're not spending your life chasing after the wrong things. The issue is actually with the road you're on. The issue is not that you haven't traveled far enough down that road. The issue is you're trying to find contentment in things that can never satisfy your heart. And I remember where this played out personally for me. Like, when I became a Christian, At around 17, I wanted to be a youth pastor. I wanted to go into ministry, and I was so excited about the possibilities. And I remember at the church I was a part of, we would attend this event called the Leadership Summit. And at the Leadership Summit, there was this church in Chicago, Willow Creek, that put on this Leadership Summit. And as a 17-year-old boy who felt called to ministry, I started telling myself, if I could work at Willow Creek one day, that'd be awesome. Like, I'd be really happy and I'd be content. And so I started working to try to get, to Willow Creek, and long story short, ended up getting the opportunity to go there. And then I started telling myself, because that wasn't enough and that didn't satisfy, I said, you know what, if I could just be like the director of the youth ministry there, then I'd be really happy. And God opened up some doors and I became the director of the youth ministry. And then I told myself, if I could just see like hundreds of kids come to salvation, and if we could just see like real movement of God, I'd be happy. And ultimately, God just did some things in about a year and a half that were just incredible. And then I started telling myself, well, you know what? Like, if Bill Hybels, the senior pastor, would just acknowledge me and I'd be recognized. And of course, these were more subconscious things. I wasn't like, writing these things on my wall, but these were just things that deep down I thought I hadn't traveled far enough down the road. And so fast forward, I got all these things. I'm the director of this ministry. I'm at Willow. I'm on leadership team now. We go to this offsite and we're giving this report of all the different things that are going on. And I share what's happening in the student ministry, and Bill and the entire leadership team are just blown away. And they go, man, let's give it up for Bryan. And they all start, giving me some praise and just, thanking me for my service and all this kind of stuff. And by the end of it, a guy comes up to me and goes, that must have been the best meeting of your life. And I told him it was actually one of the single most depressing days I've ever had. Because for years I had told myself, if I could just get to this position, contentment would be mine. Joy would be mine. That sent me on a spiral of depression, because I believe for the longest time I was chasing after the right things. I just hadn't traveled far enough down those things. Can I just say this? This might be shocking to you, but some of you, the worst thing in your life would be to see your dreams fulfilled, because you would see just how empty and void of purpose they really are. And deep down we know this, but why do you see celebrities constantly talk about depression when they arrive at their dream? Because here's why. Contentment cannot be found horizontally in the things of this earth. It can only be found in the presence of Jesus. And I just encourage you, it might sound simple, the ramifications of really believing this and living this out will transform your life. Because you can be a Christian, you can be in paradise, you can be in the presence of God and still be miserable and discontent. Or right now, you can be at the lowest season of your life, a season that doesn't seem like from the outside it should breed a lot of life and joy, and you can be content, and waters of living life and joy and peace can flow through you. It's true. So I just want to ask this question, because I think it really gets to the heart of, are you discontent or not? But here's the question I have. It's a simple question, but is Jesus a part of your life, or is Jesus the center of your life? That question might sound so simple, but it has profound implications. In fact, think about it like this. For a lot of people, if Jesus is a part of your life, this is what happens. You are at the center. And then everything in your life gets filtered through you. So ultimately, I'm at the center, but I got a job, I got a family, I got hobbies, and Jesus is the biggest part of my life, but he's still a part of my life. There's something else entirely when Jesus is the center of your life. This is the fact that Jesus runs everything. You die to yourself and he lives in you. And ultimately, every decision is influenced from the life of Jesus in and through you. Everything from your family to your job. It's not a part of you. Jesus is the center working in and through you. And these might sound small. In fact, in a room like this, you might go to church and do all the right things, and you might sit next to someone who is got Jesus as a part of their life, or Jesus as the center of their life, but their contentment and their joy will look polar opposite, because there's a total difference of making Jesus the center of everything, every decision you make, the purpose of your life. One breeds discontentment and envy, because ultimately he is not the center of everything. He is not your identity at its core. He's just a part. But if the life of Jesus reigns and lives in you, then suddenly all those things go away. And so here's just a couple questions that I want you to ask as we talk about contentment as the week goes on, because I promise you this, you'll get out, you'll be watching some ad tonight, you'll be watching something on the TV screen, and this feeling of I need this will surface. And here's two questions that I just want you to be able to ask. is this thing really gonna make me happy? This is the worst question I ask myself all the time, because this part of me just goes, I gotta buy this thing, I gotta do this, and then I'll just play devil's advocate. Is this thing really gonna make me happy? And I'm telling you, I have stopped purchasing half as much stuff. My wife is thrilled, Amazon's disappointed, but nonetheless, I just start asking, am I trying to find fulfillment and satisfaction? Because it's not gonna bring it. And then the second question, is Jesus the center of my life right now? Because you know what? You can have all the things in the world, but if you're not right with Jesus, things just feel off. I often say to my wife, your food just tastes better when you're right with Jesus. You feel the warmth on your face when you're right with Jesus. You just have a peace and a stillness when you're right with Jesus. You can have all the things going on, but if there's something off, then honestly, you can't find contentment. So here's what we're gonna do. We're just gonna take a moment. Band's gonna sing a song over you, and then Richard's gonna come out and just close out our time with a quick response in communion. But all I want you to do right now, as they just sing over you, is ask yourself these two questions. What is the thing you want right now? And ask yourself, is it really gonna make me happy? And then ask yourself, not your family or your neighbor, you right there, is Jesus really the center of my life right now? And if he's not, turn your heart towards him. Just repeat in your own way, Jesus, I want you at the center, not a part of my life. I want you to take control. But take this moment, use it. God's here in this space. He wants to pour his life and his fullness into you. Just let him take control. So as they sing this over you, just reflect on those two questions, and Richard's gonna come and close us out.
Turn my eyes to see you, Jesus, in all your glory. Turn my eyes, tune my heart to sing and wonder of how you love me. Tune my heart, oh my God, forever you reign, here and now, hear the sound of your name. Jesus, there is none more beautiful than Jesus. There is none more powerful, the risen Christ lifted high. Jesus, now be glorified. Center my life on your name. Center my life on your name. Turn my eyes away from searching for lesser glory. Turn my eyes, teach my heart with all your wisdom to live for heaven. Teach my heart, oh my God, forever you reign, here and now, hear the sound of your name. Jesus, there is none more beautiful than Jesus. There is none more powerful, the risen Christ lifted high. Jesus, now be glorified. Center my life on your name. Center my life on your name. Oh my God, forever